Welcome to a new episode of Don't Be a Man About It podcast. Hi.
Hi, Ray. It's always so good to see you. You have such
Thank
a
you. Thank
warmth
you.
and
Thank
joy
you.
about you, and I look forward to this.
So, Anthony, for those who don't know you, who is Anthony?
Well, let's see. Professionally, I spend most of my time as the chief storyteller and head of brand for a company called ExecuNet. Our audience is made up of mostly senior level executives who are going through something. It's mostly men who are in their mid 50s or older, and not exclusively, but that's where we mostly find our space. And they are going through some kind of a change, mostly around their jobs, their careers. But unavoidably, there's a deep emotional component because loss of a job or loss of your way, whatever that means to you, can be quite unhinging. And you find yourself wondering and worrying and feeling desperate at times and certainly isolated and lonely. So that's the composition of the person that we work with and help through various ways, but it comes down to understanding them very deeply as we can,
Mm.
and understanding where they want to go next, which is a very difficult thing for anyone to pinpoint themselves. So that's where our work becomes very important to them and to us.
That's awesome. So, before I ask more about that, I want to know, how is your heart doing today?
My heart is deeply okay. And I think that's some form of happiness. It's not a capital H happiness, but it's at peace, which is a very, very good thing to be able to say because it doesn't always feel that way. Certainly for all of us through these turbulent, wacky name your adjective awful times
Mm.
on so many levels, and yet I found through it that connecting with my heart and my mind has been just this buoy, this life raft, if you will, to help me get through it because I'm a citizen of the world like everybody else. And we've all lived through something that has just thrown us and at strange and oddly wonderful times and ways united us because we're all fighting this thing together. And this thing is the pandemic, but also what that means to us, which is isolation and distancing and things that are not especially human, at least not to most of us.
I agree. I agree. And especially when I was just telling a friend actually that it's amazing how this is the only year, or maybe it's the most year, 2020, where we, all of us, were collectively in the same thing. So if you're feeling lonely, there are millions of other people feeling as lonely as you are. If you are feeling desperate or weak or vulnerable or any kind of emotion, you know for a fact that there are millions who are feeling the same, which make it a little bit better, if it's making any sense. That was the only year that it happened worldwide. And the fact that you said you're trying to connect your heart and your mind despite all of that, what I'm curious to know, how do you do that? What is your rituals to stay connected and to stay as peaceful in the best as as you can?
Sure. Well, there's the road that I'm on, which is identical in so many ways to the road that most of us are on these days. But it's the journey within that I like to travel. So that physical road, which has some deep emotional implications and mental implications, I deliberately choose not to stay on because if I stay on that road, like most of us do, it is filled with all those empty things that many of us are feeling these days. The journey within is one that I put myself on, and it's a choice, and it takes some hard work and understanding of myself. And I do that in a number of ways. Service, I find, is so important to so many people, but it is important to me as a human. And I find when I give of myself, I experience something back, which is a sense of peace and knowing that I'm making some kind of difference in someone's life, professionally or personally. And gratitude is also a very, very big one, which is something given that also comes back to you. And it's
100%.
not just saying please and thank you, of course. It's something uh,
Much
far
deeper.
more reaching.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess on a far more personal level, you know this about me. Music is my lifeblood. I do many things, and music just always is the thing that has been for me. And it's something that connects me to myself in ways that are imaginable and unimaginable, because that's the alchemy of sound and music and words that combine to form a connection between me and myself, as well as myself and people out there who want to be in that audience. And that's a daily ritual. And you put yourself on it, and it's not this sort of, idealized version of creation. It's work and it's discipline, just like being an accountant, being a lawyer, being an executive, being a songwriter requires that presence and dedication, especially on days when you don't really feel like it, because there's a payoff when you commit yourself to it and you do it. That hard work turns into some form of serenity with fits and starts and trials and errors, of course, but what evolves from it is deeply gratifying to myself, first and foremost, and puts me in this place that I am, and also comes with rewards for the people that connect with it through whatever means. So that's what I do that helps me stay focused and grounded, but also
Connect.
enlightened and light somehow.
I believe that music is therapy on its own. And I don't just say it because I read it as a quote on Instagram or any kind of social media, but when you are sad, you can connect to the music, and it's some way it turns on the cells in your mind that tells you that things will be fine and things will be okay, or it kind of sends you a message that, hey, listen, you're not alone. And at the same time, when you are scared, when you want some motivation, when you want some support, we go for music. There's dance therapy, there's music, people like you who creates this art, who sings, who uses their voice. So I do believe that music is such a beautiful way to be connected. Like, for example, I love classic music. I just love it. Put a piano record or um, someone who's playing the violin or the bass. Oh my God, I could sit for hours and just listen. And I could create these scenarios in my head where I could either be the main character of the musical, or I could visualize my life, or whenever I'm mad, I could just breathe into the music, and it takes me and it works. So that technique that I personally use with myself, because it relaxes me, I started doing it with my clients, and it worked. So all of this, I'm trying to tell you that I love when people embrace more of their artistic side, because we are now living in a world where we are told what to do, like be a doctor, be a lawyer, be, I don't know, a finance analyst or something, but we never get to say be a songwriter.
No, it is both a choice you make
Yeah.
and something that finds you. And when you discover it and it discovers you, that's a type of a marriage, I guess, that you need to nurture like everything else. I love that you deliberately, Ray, use the word therapy, because when you unpack what that really is, right, it's understanding your feelings, processing your emotions so that you can solve a problem fundamentally. I know I've oversimplified it, but that's the way I look at therapy. And music for the creator is exactly that. You are trying to solve a problem. You might not be sure what it is, but you know something is nagging at you. You could be feeling an isolation, you could be feeling a heartache, you could be working through some pain or some other emotion. And the creation of music words and melody at times, is a way of solving because you're processing your feelings and understanding your emotions and not really sure. And this is kind of the alchemy part, not really sure where it's going to lead you, but trusting in that process that it will take you to a place of truth and understanding and some found awakening. And then for the listener who gets to consume all that and take that in, usually you connect with someone who's gone through or is going through something
Similar.
very similar, if not identical. And the real prize, if you will, for the creator of that moment is when the person listening says, "It sounds like you were singing only to me. You've understood me. This song is for me. How could you know so much about me?" That for me tells me that I've done something right. And it's not limited to music, of course. You could be that person if you're in marketing. You can be that person if you're an attorney. You could be that person, certainly, if you're a doctor, because it's about that individual connection. That's what I think the essence of art really is. And there's something highly therapeutic, at the very least, for the person that feels that connection with you.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Okay. One thing I really want to talk about is men. So, you know that I work with both genders, but I'm focusing a lot on men's mental health these days. And one thing that came to my attention is that women are more open to do mindfulness techniques or exercises than men. And when I've done my research, which was very narrow research, I realized that men are very scared to sit with themselves and to be in the present. They just don't want to. Why? You're someone who meditates, you're someone who's very mindful. I know you're extremely mindful. How does it work for you? And why do you think men are scared to be here and now in the present?
Mm. Well, I believe there are different answers for different people. Some of us possibly were just raised that way. Others are wired that way, or at least we perceive that our wiring can't change. I think in other cases, and I'm speaking from the experiences I've had working with so many men at the senior levels of their professions, they seem to have told themselves that, well, this works for me. I am the CEO. I'm accustomed to not being vulnerable. I'm accustomed to being the person at the helm, and I have no one around me. And that doesn't always strike the person we're talking about as a bad thing because they've advanced. They're at the top. And so they tell themselves that I just keep doing what I'm doing and I'll be fine. Not knowing that underneath that facade or that statement lurks a real life human who needs to open up, needs to cry, needs to take that emotion and express it in ways that are positive and constructive versus just keeping it inside and denying that you have it, which I think many men do. They push it down, they layer it on top of accomplishments, or rather, the accomplishments are layered over those very human things. So, job titles, achievements, material things tend to push it further and further down until you're this kind of Terminator kind of person that goes through life as something, I'm sad to say, rather robotic. It's a shell of who you are as a human. It's not really you, but who you are has escaped you. And often we need to stop and excavate that human from all the trappings that feel really good, but at some point will turn into something that isn't quite good for you.
And how do you get them to be more mindful? Have you ever, because I haven't seen you working, but I have seen you talk and do the influence that you have on people. So how do you let them know, especially when it comes to CEOs, that be more mindful is good for your not only health, but your lifestyle in general, including your business. How do you
I
make that?
um, I don't know that that's a word that ever enters their lexicon. Words like mindfulness and
Yeah.
openness and vulnerability are scary words for some of us men. And so we focus on them entirely. And that turns into a conversation, right? Okay, where are you right now? And where do you want to go? And be as specific and precise in your terms as you can be. And they'll tell you, well, I want to be this next. I want to sit on a board, for example. I want to, if I'm a vice president, be the CEO. So I kind of hear, and our team hears for where they want to go. And then we unpack as rationally at first, I believe, what is in their way, what they believe might be in their way. And you'll hear a lot of things that may not be true, but it's the story they've told themselves. Well, I'm too old, or well, I'm in this industry and I couldn't possibly go to this place because I don't have that network of connections or that experience, and down the line. So, through that experience, that process of peeling back certain things, we do ultimately get to the truth of things, which is people don't really see you. Who are you exactly? What is your gift? And once we start getting to that, and possibly in different words that I've just used, they start to very naturally share with me and with others in our space, our team, what exactly is in the way. And we have to be listening receptively. It's not again a vocabulary and a manner of speaking that they're accustomed at all to doing. They're used to words like goal and performance and results and action and implementation. Those are all fine things, but we brush those aside and talk about the person. And what we find is, as I alluded to earlier, that person is not their job title, they're not their MBAs, they're not their Harvard degrees. They are a person who has feelings and emotions and also a mind and a sense of self they might have forgotten, that our role becomes to, and I deliberately use the word excavate, if you can, or exhume, I think is another word I've used, which is to separate you from sort of the dead things. Your job might be over. That title isn't yours anymore. Those are dead things to you, but you're not tied to them. You're very separate and apart from your title, which you might have lost, or the job that was given to someone else. You're someone different from those things. Let's not define you that way. Let's define you as you. And you are a sum of gifts and value and stories and connections and relationships and hopes and expectations and aspirations and disappointments. Let's turn that into a story of you that someone else will really see and say, I like you. I want to get to know you better. I think that you can make a real difference here. So that's the process in a manner of speaking that we go through, a journey we go on together with our audience.
That's beautiful. I love what you said about that you are not your title because we were, I don't want to say raised, but we are used to whenever we are asked, who are you? You would start with your title, not even your name. Hi, I do this and my name is.
Right.
And it's very important that people would start really introducing them, getting to know themselves one, and then getting to introduce the better or higher version of themselves to the outer world. And as you said, to serve and be served. So it's a two-way thing. Anthony, how much do you think men love themselves properly? Like the true self-love?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think I'll continue to ask that of myself and hold on to that one, because that's one of those things that I think if you're blessed and wise enough at various points, you find the truth of that one. I think it depends on many things, but essentially, I don't believe each of us knows ourselves so well enough that we can fully embrace ourselves.
It's a journey.
And I think that's part of it. I think we assess ourselves completely incorrectly most of the time. We have this view of ourselves and believe the world sees us a certain way. And we often just can't get out of that shadow long enough and with enough light to really see ourselves to say, well, when I do, I love you. You're wonderful. Why am I not more like you most of the time? I'm speaking of me to myself. I think that conversation is not something that happens often because of different things. We fall into patterns. We look sadly at, and I think this even happens to grown-ups, and it happens to kids these days. We look at likes and comments and impressions that people don't even know us form about us. I think it happens in our adult lives when critics look at our art, our music, our work, and say, yeah, that's not good. And then we say, I'm terrible. I hate you, myself. How could you have done that? Says who? So I think it's a tough one to answer, but my take is that we don't really look at ourselves openly enough with that awakening feeling and sensibility to really be truthful with ourselves so that we can answer that question as faithfully as we need to.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So a lot of men are listening to this, and what would you, because you work with a range, a big range of men, and I would like you to send them a message, not only to speak up or anything that could really help them to be more open to the idea to connect with themselves so they could find the balance between their minds and their hearts. What would you say to them? Any tips, any message?
Yes. Well, the first thing I would say is it all starts sort of here. It starts with the story you tell yourself. You're completely in control of that. And your reality is the one you create with your mind and I believe with your heart as well. And start there and don't feel limited. Don't tell yourself that you can't. Don't tell yourself that you can't make changes, that you can't fly higher, that you can't change your station in life. So that's part of the story we have to tell ourselves. And in the process, eliminate if you can, and certainly reduce the noise around you that tells you otherwise, that you're flying too high, that you can't accomplish something, that you're not good enough to do something or for someone or anything like that. I think that's the key to so much of it. And that's something we're completely in charge of. And speaking especially to the audience of men that I work so closely with who love to be in charge. This is the irony of this. We pride ourselves on being in charge of so many things, in charge of people, of outcomes, of circumstances. We overlook that we're in charge of ourselves more than anything. And if you start there, the journey becomes a far more wonderful one than the alternative, which is to be told and to attempt to fit in and to attempt to be something you're not. That's the real sad part of it, I think, that we have to avoid.
I totally agree with that. Anthony, thank you so
You're
much
very
for your
welcome.
voice, for your mind, and for your heart, and for being here with me.
Well, thank you for giving me that opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you so much.